and welcome back to the Argyle CFO Leadership Forum, FP&A Strategies for Success. My name is Michael with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. You can earn 5 points per question submitted with a max of 10 points per session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Teddy Collins, Vice President, Corporate Finance with SeatGeek. We're excited to have Teddy and our panelists with us for a panel discussion titled Extended Planning and Analysis, Eliminating Silos to Unify Data. Teddy, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome, and over to you.
Hey, Michael, thanks for having us. And so my name is Teddy Collins, VP of Corporate Finance at SeatGeek. We're a mobile-focused ticketing provider for the live entertainment industry. I'm coming up on 7 years at SeatGeek, and it's definitely in my time there seeing the explosion of data and tools and a real emphasis to move kind of the office of the CFO into a more strategic function within the company, and really looking forward to digging into all of those themes with our panels today. We're going to start with some brief introductions from each of them. Charlie, could you give an introduction of yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Charlie House. I'm the Senior Manager of FP&A at AutoZone. AutoZone's a large retail or specialty retail for auto parts, obviously. We're a pretty large company. We've got somewhere around 6,000 stores in the US and more than that abroad. So it's I've been there about 3 years in this role. I've gotten to learn a lot about what a large corporate FP&A kind of organization would look like. So it's been a really interesting journey that we've had here.
And Attila, how about yourself?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this session around FP&A. My name is Attila Halmi. I spent most of my career with General Electric. I actually started with GE Lighting in my early career after university and my military service. 20 years later, I came back to help take GE Lighting private. And this was an end of an era, so to speak. About 130 years ago, Edison started the GE company with the light bulb, which is now part of another, which is now enjoying a new life, being part of another company, the Solent Group. I have had the pleasure of serving with some of the best FP&A leaders throughout my GE career in different industries, different businesses. Learned some of the best tricks of the trade from them while serving in different capacities as an analyst, as a manager later in my career. I'm looking forward to sharing some of those personal and professional experiences with you all.
That's great. And I love how this panel, we've got a mix of, small, medium, large companies. SeatGeek's a little bit on the newer side. We've got established companies, spin-outs. And just speaking to that, just kind of xP&A or extended planning and analysis can mean a lot of different things to different people. Same thing with the FP&A term. What does it mean for each of you? We'll just start off with Charlie.
Yeah, so extended planning and analysis, to me, I like to keep it simple. I like to think about it as, are you getting the right information? And it's not as important of where that information comes. I know kind of in this day and age, big data and lots of electronics and digital infrastructures. The first thing that kind of came to my mind first when I heard about this topic was exactly that. It's like, okay, well, where are we getting our feeds of data and how is that integrated? But when I think about FP&A in general and kind of an extended way out in that, I think about it more around where is that information coming from, and is it good information? It doesn't matter where it's coming from as long as it's good. And how are you getting at it? What process are you going through? Whether that is through a system or if it's just, talking to somebody in a different functional area. How are you kind of getting out from behind the screen a little bit and understanding what are the drivers that are really important to your business? So, as far as extended planning analysis, to me, I like to think about it in a little bit more simpler terms. We have a lot of finance groups at AutoZone. So, it's how do you interact with them and how do they interact with their business partners? And a little bit less to me on what cool new digital tool do we have to get data and not have to go talk to somebody? So that's kind of a little bit how I think about it.
That's great. How about you, Attila?
Excellent. So actually I looked at the dictionary definition of extended planning, which is just linking all the individual plans, so that it's financial, strategic, operational together, and make sure the entire organization is aligned. And I'd like to talk to that a little bit. So when you do extended planning, I'm sure many of you have done financial planning, but extended planning goes a little bit beyond that. It ensures connectivity across various functions, various parts of the organization, whether you do it at a high level, so you connect with different businesses, or whether you do it within one segment and you connect across the board, starting at the top of your P&L with your sales. Do you have that sales number broken down by customers, by segments, by market? Then do you have it by products? What kind of products are you planning on selling? What's the volume? What kind of raw material do you need to buy, or source products do you have to purchase? What's your packaging material? Where is that coming from? Where is the raw material coming from? If it's coming from, is it coming from inside or outside of the US? If it's coming from the outside, do you actually have to pay tariffs or increase customs and duties when you import it? Do you have the right lead times in the system? So extended planning is a little bit more, is a lot more than financial planning. It's making sure that you have the right components throughout the entire business to meet or exceed your financial plans.
Definitely. That's certainly very interesting. And I think, especially in businesses where you have kind of a physical supply chain component, the kind of operational, strategic, financial planning, has to be integrated, otherwise you're not going to be set up for success. How about for companies that might just be pure software companies, or some of your other experiences? What would you say are the conditions necessary that push finance groups into kind of this xP&A mindset in order to have building blocks to be able to take that journey?
So no matter what industry or what kind of company you're working for, there is workforce planning. So if you think about the software company, you write code. What kind of programs are you working on? Whether it's you're launching new products, whether you're doing something that's an upgrade, whatnot, you can estimate the level of work, the amount of work, and the level, the volume that needs to be done. And for that, you need to know: do I need to hire more software engineers? Do I have the right talent? If you have both if you have hardware engineers and software engineers, do I have the right mix in my company? So no, I would say it doesn't matter whether you work in a service industry, manufacturing industry, or at any level. You have to do a little bit of planning beyond your financial needs in order to ensure that the right resources available, whether it's human resources or products or financial resources. If you are in banking, you need to ensure that you break down your financial plans to segments that an operating leader can take care of, and then you set your targets right. You may hold those operating leaders accountable for hitting or meeting whatever you're targeting, so your entire business goes together in the same direction. It's just like having multiple people in the same canoe, and if you're not paddling at the same speed in the same direction, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah, and then Charlie, for you, first, how long have you been at AutoZone, and kind of what's been the kind of that transformation journey from you all? Because there's this, we're talking about process. How has process and systems help you on your xP&A journey?
Yeah, so I've been at AutoZone for 3 years now. And when I started, I knew this coming in. They hadn't had a, I'll call it a real planning system. So I'm a big proponent of systems. So don't get me wrong. I think I don't think you'll ever get to kind of a place where you just hit a button and it does all your planning for you. But they didn't have one really. So all of the planning was really done in Excel. And this, something I was thinking about just writing some notes for this discussion was, you don't have to invest a ton of money to get started, and you can keep it simple. So, for a couple of decades, they did all their planning in Excel, and they would migrate that into the ERP system, but they did all their planning that way. And the reasons why it worked, one, they've got a lot of fabulous finance people. But the reasons why it worked is because of that relationship. So, there's a lot of trust, there's a lot of integrity, a lot of credibility between the finance groups, the different business partners, and FP&A. So that's kind of the first part I would go when Attila was speaking about a software company. The first thought I was going with was, when you start planning, it was like, well, you probably have to talk to a sales leader on what they expect, and you can't go just consult well, what did we sell last week? You actually have to go talk to somebody. So from a process standpoint, I think just from a planning standpoint, you've got to kind of get that cadence down. Okay, when are we going to do the annual plan? And when are we going to update that with a quarterly plan? Do we want to do a weekly update on, for the quarter or something like that? So you kind of get that cadence down first, and then you got to get people used to that cadence. And then once you got people used to that cadence, then you start kind of zeroing in on what really matters. Because they're going to be, from our standpoint, from a corporate, very top of the kind of top level, we're not at the division level. We're at the top. We're concerned about the big drivers. I'm not concerned that somebody spent $300,000 on anything, because I'm really concerned that we're spending $200 million on store payroll next week or something. It's you got to figure out what are going to be the real drivers that you need to focus on. Hopefully in your P&L, sales is the largest item on the P&L. But it's kind of those things. Okay, so I know sales is a big driver. I need to make sure we have some focus on it. If I know my gross margin is another big driver, we need to have some focus on it. Same thing with payroll. A lot of our companies, 50 to 60% of your costs are wrapped up in payroll. So it's kind of starting to think about, okay, what are the drivers? What's the cadence? While you're on this journey. And that's where you can really get started. And then, once you kind of got that down, then you can start thinking about, okay, well, now how can we make it more efficient? How can we make it better? How can we analyze this? I think that's where a software solution really helps you. It doesn't help you because it's not going to analyze the data for you, and it's not going to put the information in there for you. You've got to do that yourself. So I think it can be simple. You can start simple, start slow, start with, you put it a great way, the process, and then kind of get there.
I'd love to double click on that a bit, because AutoZone's been around for a number of years and it's been successful for a long time. So there's something that happened a few years ago that prompted that kind of monumental shift from spreadsheets into a planning tool. Kind of who were the stakeholders? Why did they want to do it? How did the rest of the organization kind of agree to go along on that journey?
Yeah, and it's a really great question. We've got in our value statement, you can go look at the website and pick it up, a culture of thrift. So we're definitely an efficiency and try to get every bit of value we can out of something. The tool that we use to kind of take everybody's plan and migrate it into the ERP system wasn't going to be supported anymore. So we had to go do something. So while we were doing that, we said, hey, let's really go look at a nice solution. And so that's kind of what prompted it. So we got every bit of value we could out of the other thing. We said, all right, it's really time for something now. So that's the kind of the catalyst for change sometimes, is that you have to change. But as far as the stakeholders, right now, the stakeholders have really been finance, and I try to preach this sometimes because we've been talking about the next steps in this journey, and I said, hey, look, planning has gotten a lot of use and gotten a lot of benefit out of this. Now it's time that we make sure the other finance teams get a lot of use and a lot of benefits out of this, not just planning, but start focusing on the A in FP&A, and that's analytics. How can they do things more efficiently and faster and be more effective and give better value to their business partners? So I think that's the next step in the journey. But yeah, the catalyst for change is we had to change.
Yeah, and then for you, Attila, I guess how has you and your group kind of felt empowered to go, and would you say are you your group the main driver in this kind of integrated process? And if so, how did you make that happen?
Right. So for us, it was kind of easy in the General Electric Corporation. Part of the company culture was that FP&A was always in the middle, was the driving engine. In fact, many CEOs would rather go to the FP&A guy for information than to the CFO, because they know the CFO would just go to FP&A to ask for it. So you kind of sort of in the middle of everything at every point of time. But I would say, to those of us who are just starting on this journey, don't think that you have to invest a huge amount of money, whether it's $1 million or $1 billion is a huge amount of money. It matters, whatever matters to your business. I agree with Charlie, you can start small. And if your company is scrappy and you don't want to invest anything at all, there's nothing wrong with Excel. As long as you understand your business, as long as your operating leaders are aligned behind your planning cycle, and we can talk about that a little bit later. You can have a very good plan put together, and even more importantly, a plan by itself is not as important as the execution of that plan. So one of the questions here is like, how do you get people more bought into this process? As long as everybody understands, you don't just do the plan for the filing cabinet. You don't just do it because finance said so. You do it for the entire organization. And then you go back to that plan from time to time and see how are we doing, compare yourself against it, or say that, hey, look, now we have to revise it if there's new market information available, or there's significant changes, shifts that will make you want to go back and revise your plan. You can actually do that too. So don't necessarily rely on your forecasting tool either. Charlie and I were talking right before this call that the best forecasting tool will spit out data for you, and that may mean nothing without human intelligence. So the value that people in the audience today of this call will bring to all that is interpreting the data. Whether you have an Excel spreadsheet or you have $1 billion invested in a forecasting tool, you still need people who read the output, whatever it's coming from, and make intelligent decisions off of it. And as much as we all have AI, it's not there yet. They still need us finance guys to make those, to help with those decisions.
Yeah, and I'd love to pivot the conversation a bit more to thinking about the data environment and control environment. There's all this data. There could be multiple tools within your organization. Can you just talk a bit about the balance of bringing transparency to finding the right data, but then thinking about the control environment on who should have access to that data, how should we keep it, do we purge data? Just kind of drive into that a bit. How about you, Charlie?
So I've got a very strong opinion that I know some people don't follow. I think the fewer people that have access, the better. Or when I say that, I mean you should have access to the things you need access to, and that's from a security standpoint. And not that everybody's going to go off and do insider trading, but it's also information for the sake of information can be distracting if it's not pertinent to your job or how you help out your business leaders. Then I'm not so sure that you need to even read it, because then it's just a distraction. You're thinking about something that you don't affect, or it can't help you in your job. So, I would say you probably need to limit that as much as possible. On the flip side of that is it's always good to get a fresh set of eyes. So I'll talk out of both sides of my mouth on that. But I've been in an organization where you only had access to very, very narrow, like, here is your exact things. And in AutoZone, we're a little bit, I won't say looser, but with as far as finance goes, we give a lot more information, which is great for transparency. But like I said, I think, people can get bogged down in that. Now, the only other piece of that is depending on the solutions you're using. If you're doing everything in Excel, it's a little bit more difficult to kind of, get that feedback loop and not share as much. You've got to really work at it. You can use things like SharePoint, or you can go out of your way and make it a little bit more difficult. But I think it's important to share as much information as you can with someone that is relevant for them, where they can give good opinions and they have, kind of a dog in the hunt. But at the same time, if they're working in one division, they don't need to see every bit of operational finance material from another division. So it can be a distraction. I've seen it be a distraction, actually. So that's not an opinion that everybody shares, but that's kind of my strong opinion, that, yeah, you need data security.
Great. But yeah, and certainly with Excel, keeping a working model and taking out that one sheet could be the bane of your existence, and you get into the macro world and all of EBA and all that complicated stuff. So enterprise systems, definitely I've seen, can help enable that transparency at scale. But you certainly have to invest a lot up front to understanding that security model and kind of implementing it into the application, from early on. So as you scale, the kind of customizations don't keep layering on top of each other to get access to stuff.
I agree with Charlie, and just to add one more aspect to this. So, of course, you need to make sure that your data is secure, and on a need-to-know basis. Like if you have different divisions and they all get, let's say, challenges on top of whatever they rolled up, you don't want them to look at each other and say, oh, well, he got 5%, and why did I get 10% more or less? So there's a little bit of that when you compartmentalize. But on the other hand, once you're done with the plan, you need to make sure that everybody understands what that plan is and how does it relate to their organization. So nothing saddens me more when somebody walks into a review and they either pitch numbers or receive numbers, and that's not my plan, that's not my numbers. So it's up to us, finance and FP&A, to ensure that once we roll up the plan, we also distribute it and ensure that at the beginning of the year, whenever, whatever the planning cycle of each individual organization is, at the beginning of your planning cycle or your financial year, let's say, everybody has a commitment to delivering one set of numbers, not various plans that typically contradict with each other.
That's great. Yeah, so I think maybe for all three of us, we kind of are on the later end of the stage of kind of the finance transformation journey. I'd love both of you to kind of put on your time machine hats of, back in the days at your company or in other ones where you're just starting that journey. Maybe think of smaller companies or finance groups that are just trying to keep up with what the actual numbers are. Can you just kind of give some practical first steps to start thinking about the xP&A mindset, whether it be a process or a system that's not $1 million to implement? Just like what are some baby steps people can think about?
Yeah, I'll start. I think, I would say the first step is probably get out from behind your computer. Attila and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, and I think he said it best. Said human intelligence. you're not going to find anything from behind that computer for the future that isn't easier to go have a conversation with somebody. So, if you're at a smaller company, or you don't have a lot of staff to help you out, or excuse me, you don't have a lot of other groups to help you out, you've got to be that. You've got to go talk to those people. So I would say, both of us kind of echoed, you don't have to go out and spend $1 million. You can use things like Excel, or another just template or a database tool that's relatively cheap. But then the next thing you've got to think about is the process, and then you've got to think about the drivers. So, like I said, for P&L, there are going to be a certain number of things that actually drive your business, and those are the things you need to go focus on. And if you've got to let the monthly luncheon that cost $1,000 go, and guess what, I didn't plan for it, not going to break your bank. You can get better at that later, but you need to focus on those big drivers first. This is still kind of a big company standpoint, but I think about kind of our cash flow statement, and when we've got to kind of plan that out and go through the business of planning out the balance sheet, which can be difficult. I think about it from a standpoint of, okay, well, we've got large swings in inventory, we've got large swings in accounts payable, we've got CapEx that we're doing, and then we do share repurchases, a lot of share repurchases. Those are the items. I'm not going to go off and find out what my accounts receivable are doing, because they're a stable item and they're relatively small, but those are the big items that I need to go make sure I go talk to people about. So if you're in a small shop, biggest thing on a P&L, you're going to talk about sales. So you need to kind of fix that in your mind, how you're going to do that, what's the cadence, how you're going to update it, those kind of things. And that doesn't have to take a lot of resources, but you got to go talk to the right person or people. Then after that, you just kind of go down the list of drivers and you say, okay, well, who do I go talk to? And that can be difficult. If you're in a small shop, or if you're in a small finance group with a large number of people to go talk to, it can be difficult. But the other piece is you've got to build that trust and credibility and integrity with people, because somebody's not going to tell you anything if they don't trust you. And if you don't go out and see them where they are, they're not going to want to tell you anything. Because I don't know if you've noticed this, but sometimes finance people and business people speak different languages. And, I'm not a salesperson, but sometimes that salesperson is going to want me to be out in the field with them and see what they do and understand, give a little bit of empathy about what they do. Attila and I were talking about that a little bit before, about engineers being a good audit source, because sometimes when they go to a plant or something, they've worked on some of those things and they can talk that language. So I think, what I tell you is the human capital piece of it's really, really important, because you've got to get good human intelligence on the front end, or it doesn't matter what your plan, what you put in that plan. It's just numbers on an Excel spreadsheet.
That's great. Kind of building on that, I think what I found is, as a finance person, the first question or the top goal is, how can you be useful to that, to the people in the plan, or the people in the operations, or the people in sales. And I'd say one of the early learnings I had there was, we made this acquisition. We went to new business line, and we were building out a CRM system, which is probably the bane of existence for many salespeople. And kind of the first iterations, it was very kind of executive focused, kind of gave great analytics on the pipeline, how things are going, things are progressing, but it didn't help the salespeople sell any more products. So there's this kind of natural reluctance to to go and use it. And until we got to iteration 2 or 3 and actually made it more useful and made it easier for people to sell and get the information they needed from across the organization, that's when it became both more useful for the executives as well as the people on the ground. That's definitely something I kind of take into each project. So I want to add anything there?
Right. Just in case of a smaller company, you will still do planning. If you only have like a small factory with a couple of dozen employees, your leader, your plant manager, whatever the title is, will always know, what are they building the next day? What do they need to perform next week or the next month? So your planning may be just sitting down for half an hour between the two of you and hashing things out versus creating gigantic spreadsheets. And your actuals may be running QuickBooks and instead of a big SAP or Oracle system, but you still have to do some planning. And I'd like to answer the first question I was at this time, like, how do you incentivize people to participate in? And there's different ways of doing that, but I'd say ensuring that everybody who's involved in the process understand that this is to their benefit, and making sure they want to do it, versus because the finance team is doing this and they said I need to contribute. It is in that if they know what you're doing, why you're doing it, I find it most people will honestly want to contribute, they want to participate, and as long as they understand that this turns into next year budget, they will be the ones who are coming to you and say, hey, when are we doing this? Because I want to take a seat at the table. I want to give you my inputs before you lock me into a number that I don't like. So it is issuing a calendar. So some tactical steps that you can do, like giving heads up to people, putting some meetings on the calendar, ensuring that they work the time that's needed to go into this instead of just dropping last minute notes or emails on them, as well as just talking to people. Nothing substitutes that, whether you do it in person, online, over the phone, day, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever works for you all. Use all the tools available to you just to bring people together and make sure that you have a connected plan.
Yeah, definitely. Going back to when I joined SeatGeek, we were just under 100 people. I was the first FP&A hire, so it was just doing small things first, starting with building the first Excel model, then a couple of years later, throwing that away, kind of rebuilding it into a more collaborative Google Sheets model. That turned into 60 different sheets, very difficult to keep up with. And then we went out and got kind of a proper enterprise tool. And I'd say there's going to like some resources out there that you can do some of this research. I'd say there's tons of venture capital dollars going into all of these startups and some more established software providers. Always reading about some of the bigger ones. You can look at reports from Gartner and Gartner Magic Quadrants, my favorite reading materials. But there are more kind of emergent kind of FP&A influencers, so to speak, on LinkedIn that I've seen. I'd highly recommend this person called the FP&A guy. He just came up with this great kind of research report of 30 up and coming FP&A tools out there. So you don't have to make big kind of $50,000, $100,000 investments to get some of these solutions into your organization. There's some very approachable kind of per seat license things that are just kind of better spreadsheets that keep you out of the business of emailing 50 different reports out with a mail merge and VBA macros and splitting up Excel files that can really free up the time for you to go out and be able to have those conversations. Because when you think about it, you've got to do the accounting close, you've got to make the reports, you've got to do budget versus actuals, and then talk to 35 different stakeholders. I think that adds up to 50, 80 hours a week pretty quickly. So always having that type of scale mindset, I think has helped us, because our parts of our finance org are kind of the same size when we were a 100-person company, now 800 people with many more times in revenue and engineers. So kind of on that topic, what's next for both of you all is just on the just across the people, processes, systems side. What do you see the future for your org and maybe our function more broadly?
Yeah, so specific to kind of AutoZone, I think I mentioned this a minute ago. I think our kind of next thing is a little bit out of planning and more on the analysis piece. We've got a lot of finance professionals that have been really used to pulling things out of the ERP system. Somebody actually asked me the other day, we use PeopleSoft asked me if I had access. I was like, yeah, I got access, but I do my best to stay out of it. Because it's not really there for analytics. You know, it's an enterprise resource system, so it's not really, that's not really what it's built to do. But that's kind of what we've made it do. So a lot of people, they've got queries set up and they're good at running them. And some of the other tools, data tools that we have, you got to, you know, at least have some knowledge of SQL coding to get stuff out of there. So what I really see kind of for our journey is really getting that into a place where it's just a more user-friendly interface. So people can get some of these things faster. Just, you know, thinking about close, a great example I've kind of given, we've been doing some training on our planning system with it. It's got an Excel add-in so you can kind of refresh reports. Well, you know, instantaneously. What I tell people is like, hey, look, you go run this gigantic query out of PeopleSoft and it takes you an hour. Now that's great. You can schedule that ahead of time or whatever. You can press this button and you can have this information in 10 seconds. So to me, I think that's probably where our journey is next. Is we've got a lot of benefit out of the planning side. Now let's go focus on the analytics side. Let's go, you know, get them faster so they can be freed up to do other things more efficiently and effectively. And then let's go see what other questions they have. I don't know what all of them are, but I think, you know, then it's getting more granular data or more widespread data than what we're doing right now. So I think that's probably the focus that I would like to see us go to is analytics.
Yeah, definitely. When you said different groups running queries, that definitely sent shivers down my spine. That I don't know if we'll come to the same answer in what the actual whatever account it is if they're running queries versus coming out of your other planning tool. Have you, from that perspective, what have you done from a kind of a master data management perspective to say like this is revenue, this is headcount, this is like this number? How do you handle that source of truth information?
It's a good question. I guess it depends on what you're doing. And unfortunately, I started my career as an auditor at Ernst & Young, and I never came across a company whose planning and reporting system was in scope. So it's really great for management reporting, and it can be correct, but it still wouldn't matter for the auditor. So if you're doing something, the way I put it to someone, they were looking at some reconciliations, some large reconciliations that are very important that the auditors always look at. They would pull out certain canned reports that our financial systems team have already kind of set up for that purpose. Still takes a while. They're still using a big Excel workbook to kind of, well, let me copy this data into this other workbook and use a VLOOKUP or an index formula to kind of put it where I want it. What I kind of have told people is even in that instance, you can still use the planning system or or the reporting function of that system to get your answer instantaneously, because you can find out if there's an issue. And instead of it taking you, 3 days to figure out if there's an issue, now you found out there's an issue in the first 10 seconds, you can go ahead and tell somebody there's an issue and say, well, I'll finish the reconciliation later, or I can always do the control aspects of it later and tie everything out to, what's a reliable source, but we need to fix something else now. So that's kind of where I see the benefits there, because you're exactly right. You'll have an issue with some of those things if you're just relying on your queries. From a standpoint of people that are actually using their own queries, I think when I was on the audit team, what we would tell people was like, okay, well, how do you know that's correct? Did you tie it out to another source somewhere else that is reliable? And okay, if you did that once, you need to be checking the query, when you do this, to make sure the query hasn't changed, something like that. So it's a good question, and I look at it more of a speed to answer than than a control standpoint a lot of times. And that's what I kind of try to tell people to focus on is you may need to give an answer in 5 minutes and you do not have time to go run a query.
So you really shook off your auditor background there.
Oh man, I got rid of that thing as soon as I got out of there.
And also you have to put it into context. If you're looking at a bank account, for example, you reconcile it probably to the pennies, right? If you have $1 missing, you just don't go to bed until you find it. It's just that kind of people you are. But like you talked about, lunch money or things like that. And if you give a rough estimate on how much did we spend on food and entertainment, that's okay. And if you work for a bigger company and you measure your revenue in millions of dollars, it really is not that important whether it's $102.1 million, so you just say it's roughly $100 million. So again, when you put it into context, you can quickly understand, what's the level of complexity and how many degrees of freedom do you have in answering that question.
Cool. Yes, I'd love to each of you kind of give some examples of maybe some of the larger processes or systems you put in, and just tell a bit about the journey from kind of inception, tool evaluation, actual implementation, user acceptance. Just what kind of quantum of time are you talking about, from days, weeks, months, years, just to give people a good idea of what to expect. Charlie, you mentioned that you you kind of did a big transformation project. Just tell us a bit about that.
Well, luckily they had already chosen the tool before I got there, or I guess unluckily, I don't. It's a good tool. We actually utilize Workday Adaptive Planning. It was the first time I had ever heard of it when I got to AutoZone. At Smith and Nephew, we had a handful. We had 2 Hyperion systems. I think we had S-Base and HFM, and then we had TM1. I think that's IBM Analytics now. I think they rebranded. We had Business Objects also, and then we had just a handful of data tools. You kind of just Frankenstein them all on. But as far as kind of the implementation was pretty quick. It's a cloud-based solution, and it just depends. I think it depends on what you're trying to do. And when I say the implementation was quick, I mean, we got our annual budget process up and running very quickly. We had a very, very strong finance systems team, in particular, one of our finance systems manager, who's just kind of an expert. And he did a phenomenal job of kind of implementing kind of the first steps of it, actually most of it. So, on the front end, I think it took us probably 2 years to get all of our planning processes on there. And I say all of them. We do a 10-year long range plan, an annual budget, quarterly latest estimates, and then a weekly forecast that updates for the quarter. So it took about 2 years to get all of those on there, with the exception of the long range plan. I'm working on that now. We'll hopefully get that done in the next month or so. So it takes some time. I think, the bigger point, and so I think somebody asked this question, was how do you get people to use it? And I think that's the piece that you got to, Attila, maybe you said this, you or Teddy, you got to show what benefit it gives them. And that's the part where it takes a little bit. I'm a little bit more of a stick kind of person on that. I say put it in their objectives, and that'll make sure they get it done. But at the same time, it's a big benefit just to show them, especially if you've got a group that's never really had that kind of solution before. Show them what it can do, how powerful it is, how much time they will stop wasting running queries. And I think that's probably the place where I think it'll take a little bit more time. The implementation, depending on how strong how strong of kind of the talent you have to implement it, we really lucked out on that. Can be done pretty quickly, but yeah, I think it's a journey. It's not going to be just a flip the switch and it happens overnight.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree with the comment, Charlie. It is a journey, and it will also depend on a couple of factors. For example, how big is your organization? If you are planning to put a tool in place for a small all encompassing one location or organization. You know, everyone, so you got 50 people, everybody's sitting in the same site, you have some manufacturing going on. It would probably take a lot less time than for a multi-billion-dollar company who's got locations all over the 5 continents and sells in over 100 countries. Also, you have to consider what kind of resources do you have. Can you free up internal resources, or are you buying time and people from outside consultants who will come in and help you with the implementation and with the education of the internal folks? So there's a lot of things that you have to decide up front. So last but not least, what I recommend is that you spend sufficient amount of time upfront on planning. Decide what you want. Don't waste time by jumping in with both feet and say, hey, look, I want to do this, let's do it. Because then you'll miss out on lots of things. So planning is essential for the planning system itself.
Yeah, definitely. I say we kind of implemented a very, very similar tool and the exact same one. And you know, we're 3 years in, and I feel like it just continues to get better and better. But you know, we're up and running in 2 or 3 months. But then we kind of implement some more basic representations of things like headcount planning or revenue planning. And then, you know, the next year we, you know, added some more dimensionality to the model. And I think what these systems are good at, especially, you know, we had the benefit of kind of doing everything from scratch and not having as much of the Frankenstein enterprise systems. So it's not as many competing tools, but they're very good at, you know, just taking the burden off of, you know, doing the regional report or the product line report, because it can just be a drop down and a menu, and it can kind of be it's our best self-serve data repository, and that's kind of how we use it for the most part. And we've got many fewer kind of like power planners within it. So that's worked well for us so far. You know, we just have a few minutes left, maybe just kind of one minute for each, but just kind of any final thoughts on things we've talked about, or any other themes you'd like to bring up. How about you, Attila?
So what I'd like to talk to is the future of FP&A. I think there's a lot of automation coming, but at the same time, the brain power of good FP&A analysts, FP&A managers can never be replaced. And I've seen in my career so many promotions out of FP&A into CFOs and other big business leaders that is incredible. You are, if you choose a career within FP&A, you stay with it, that's great. You will, if you just want to stay for a couple of years and learn the necessary, the guts and the glory of the business, it's one of the best places to be, because everything is focused around financials, at least in corporate America, and the way of translating all the operating mechanisms and results into financials, you will understand the business like no one else.
That's awesome. How about you, Charlie?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is, you know, thinking about these silos, how do you break them down, and how do you make your plan meaningful? Is trust and integrity. You know, if you're constantly cutting someone's budget, and maybe you should, but just doing it without really understanding them, or if you're not meeting somebody where they are and understanding kind of what they do and what value they bring to the company, if you're only looking at spreadsheets, nobody's going to give you any of the information that you need to do your job. So it's one of those things. It's kind of the circle. You're going to have to build that trust and that integrity, and that goes beyond a spreadsheet. You know, it goes beyond a system. You're going to have to go talk to somebody and really, you know, understand them, and maybe don't agree with them, but you're going to have to understand them and learn how to tell that story of aligning that stuff. Attila said it great, aligning that plan with the business and how you're going to be successful.
Yeah, definitely picking up on, we're seeing all these great tools there, and some of the more of the vaporware around machine learning and doing your plan will get better over time. But I think what we'll see is, I kind of see there's kind of three roles of the FP&A, xP&A function. You've got the kind of the analyst work, actually kind of doing the fancy modeling, but then more and more it's going to be about the data architect and how do you get all of these systems to talk to each other, and it moving from the IT org into finance. But at the end of the day, I think the kind of the storyteller role of our groups is what can take all of that data, all that business partnering, all that influence, and really kind of give meaning to kind of all the data within the organization to then go and do something useful with it. And I'd like to take this time to thank both of our panelists for the great discussion today, and I think our session MC, Michael, do you want to say some final words for folks?
Yes, thank you, Teddy, Attila, and Charlie. This is an insightful session. It was a good one. I also want to thank everyone for joining us today for this fantastic discussion. Now, this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. This officially concludes the Argyle CFO Leadership Forum FP&A Strategies for Success. We would like to thank our sponsors, Workday and Divi. And thank you again for joining us and engaging in our content. And have a great rest of your day.